Hey, I'm really excited about this next session. We're going to take 7 minutes with a few legendary leaders that are in the room and talk about some topics and issues that we all are dealing with or need to be dealing with. And so I want you to put your hands together and help me welcome our first guy up, Rob Hoskins. Come on up, Rob. Have a seat, my friend. Those of you that don't know Rob, you met him this morning a little bit when I introduced him, but Rob is one of the smartest guys I know. He's a president of a great ministry, I think one of the greatest ministries on the planet that is helping to spread the gospel, One Hope, and I'm not just saying that because you're here. I'm your biggest fan everywhere I go, but you are a missiologist, and those of you that don't really know what that word means, it's where a culture and the church and the world all collide and intersect. It's the study of anthropology and sociology and eschatology and how it works together for us to reach. Just saying those words make me feel smarter, Rob. And when I'm around you, I feel smarter. So I just got a couple questions for you. When it comes to better understanding the world that we live in today, what are some changes that you're seeing out in the world that we as the church need to be responding to?
Well, thanks, Todd, and just incredibly grateful to be here and love my relationship with Christ Fellowship. And I'm always, I got to say this because it might be my only chance, but aren't Todd and Julie just about the most humble leaders that we've seen in the American church? And love you guys so much and love your passion for a lost world. I think, one thing we're passionate about in serving the global church is realizing how much everything has changed over the last 20 to 30 years. And how we need to be aware of those changes in order to know what our missions programs are going to be able to effectively do with this generation. And so we see a couple trends that are emerging that I think we need to be mindful of. And one of those things is our world is more connected than it's ever been before. And in many ways, the church really hasn't taken advantage of what we call a collaborative economy, a collaborative connected world, and us having the ability to realize that we can do things in the 21st century in serving the global church that our parents had never been able to do in the 20th century. So how do we establish better communications with our partners around the world and service to them is really, really key and critical. How do we as the church use technologies and the specialities that God has placed in our congregation and understand that that actually is our missions program? So it's taking what God has done in our local community and really establishing a mission from our neighborhoods to the nations and realizing that we live in a completely different paradigm than we did in the 20th century, which was really a missiology from us to them, from the West to the rest. And now we live in a world that is from all to all. And so in a connected, technology connected, but also relationally connected world, we've got to completely change the way we're doing things in the area of missions.
And you do a great job of bringing together like-hearted, like-minded people from all over the globe. We were just in a meeting last week in Miami with leaders from all around the world. And one of the things they brought up was that we've got to understand how connected people are to each other and to information, and how we as a church, sometimes we tell them they got to come to us on Sunday, or maybe come to us on Sunday and a midweek gathering, and that's all the time they can connect, while they're really connected to each other and to other people all the time. How do we as a church respond to maybe better connecting with them where they are?
Yeah, I think one thing, first, it has to be a change in our mindset. So, I mean, when we think about missions, like I said, it's very much been focused upon what is it that we can sort of do to them rather than understanding. So if we sort of look at what's happened in the last 100 years, so 100 years ago, 75% of the church was in the West, was in the US and in Europe, and 25% was in what we called the majority world church. Well, fast forward to where we are now 100 years later, and actually 75% of the church is actually in the majority world, and we're only 25% of the global church. And yet our relationship to that church hasn't changed very much. So what we have to begin to do is to say, how do we identify, and we do this through building asset maps, so that we have a proactive missiology that says, instead of me sort of trying to find where the need is around the world, maybe what I should be doing is to find out what God's already doing in the world through really high capacity, local church partners that I can come along and serve, because those are the people that are going to transform their nations. It isn't going to be the American church coming in necessarily with our resources. Now, what we have to understand is that there is a unique place for us as the American church in the world in which we live right now. So we are only 12% as Americans of the global evangelical community, yet we control over 75% of the global evangelical wealth in the world. So there's a disproportionate amount of resource that we have that the world doesn't have. And it's not just money, it's also education, human resource, areas of speciality like technology and education and medical that the rest of the global church is dying for. And it's those specialties that we need to pull out of our congregation, out of our seats, and actually use that to serve the global church, because those are the needs they have. We really don't need a missiology of generalists to the rest of the world. We really need to get specialized in what we're doing.
Wow. Let that sink in for a minute. In the remaining 2 minutes we have, is there anything that you wish you could grab besides that? That was either double click on that in an area, or something else that you want us to chew on as church leaders when it comes to missions.
I mean, if I've got 2 minutes, what I've got to say is there's too much at stake for us not to change the way we're doing missions. It's 2,000 years since Jesus gave us the Great Commission and the Great Commandment to love the whole world. And yet we live in a world right now, Todd, where over a third of the world has never once heard the name of Jesus. We live in a connected world, but 89% of all Muslims, Buddhists, and Hindus have never once personally had a relationship with a Christian. That's just unacceptable. 2,000 years after Jesus said, take my word and give it to every person on this planet. Of the 6,000 language groups in the world, 2,000 don't even have one single scripture in their own language. That means we can't plant churches, we can't do discipleship, we can't do leadership training with a third of the people and languages in this world that have never had access to the scriptures. And there's no reason for us in the times in which we live. The Bible says, understand your times and know what to do. We live in the most amazing times, and the Great Commission does not have to be the dream of a future generation. It can become the reality of ours if we think smarter about what we're doing.
Amen. Would you help me thank Rob Hoskins for challenging us today? Thank you, man. God bless you. Thank you. I had the privilege just a couple weeks ago to sit down with Dr. John Maxwell. Dr. Maxwell's part of our teaching team here and good friends with my mom and dad, he and Margaret. He is out of town as he's traveling a lot, but he wanted to take a moment to speak to us. So I actually sat down with some questions with Dr. Maxwell. So let's watch this together. John, thank you for taking a few minutes to sit down and talk with all the leaders gathered here today. I know you would love to be with us at the conference if you could, and thank you for this. You just recently republished your classic book, Developing the Leader Within You 2.0. It is a book that we use with all of our leadership training here at Christ Fellowship. Tell us, what was the one fundamental change, or I know there were several, that makes this a must reread for everybody here?
Well, first of all, it's the second best-selling leadership book ever written, and somebody asked me, why would you revise a book that was doing so well? And the reason I would is because no matter how good we were yesterday, if we're growing, we're better today.
That's good.
And I think the point that all leaders need to understand is whatever is my best now will not be my best tomorrow if I'm growing. And I think, in fact, in the book, I do a little section on don't rest on the best. And I think that what happens, Todd, a lot of times is we just get so settled and satisfied and say, I think I've got it. And if you at any time in life you think you have got it, you're either saying, one, I'm not going to grow anymore, and so then I got it because it isn't going to get any better. Or number two, you're certainly unaware of the future that growth gives you, because the only guarantee that tomorrow is going to be better for you or for me is that we're growing today. That's the only guarantee. So when people say, I say, how about your future? Well, I'm kind of hoping it's going to get better. It only is going to get better if I'm intentionally growing today. And I would have to say that probably, I know I'm known for leadership, but I think probably my passion to never settle and to constantly learn and grow has been maybe my best asset as far as developing. And so when I got to Developing the Leader Within You book, and revised it. I revised 89% of it. In fact, that's why they call it 2.0, because I think the publisher said, this is almost like a new book. I mean, it's got the structure of the old book, but it's new stuff. And again, I went back, Todd, and I read it, and I thought, wow, I can do better. So I'm so excited about this book, because in it, I put in 3 new chapters, and one of the chapters that's so powerful is the chapter on change. Because leaders really, what really makes you a great leader is your ability to create positive change. and to be on the front end, not on the back end. It's the best mentoring book I've done on leadership. I mean, if I'm going to take somebody and I'm going to say, okay, I want you to be a leader, that's the first book I'm going to put in their hand.
Absolutely.
Because that's just nuts and bolts on leadership.
It's one of the first books my dad put in my hand and said, Todd, you need to read this book over and over again.
And look at you now. Look at you now. Your dad's even surprised. We're all surprised.
Second question. I recently heard that you took all of your files of illustrations and stories that you have compiled over the years and you threw them away. You literally put them in the dumpster. I think we all would have picked up dumpster diving that day if we had known you were getting ready to do that.
I wanted to do a little of that myself after I did it.
What led you to that decision, and what have you learned since then?
Well, it was the hardest decision I've ever made emotionally because I've been filing since I was 17. But it was a great decision. I really weighed that out a long time, told nobody. I mean, when I said told nobody, I told nobody. Because I just wanted to weigh it out. And the reason I made it was because I was leaning too heavily on yesterday. And first, two things about yesterday. One is yesterday isn't good enough for today. So if you're leaning on yesterday, it's not good enough. And number two is it became a security to me that was keeping me from being as creative as I could be. I mean, if I'm sitting at my desk and I'm saying, I can either think and get creative, or I can go over there and pick something up that I already have that I know works. The laziness in me will make me go over there and pick up that.
Right.
So how do I get rid of that laziness? How do I get rid of that sense of relying on what I've already done? Well, it's very simple. Get rid of it. and when I got rid of it, and I paid a guy a couple $100 to take it away, and I went back and it was gone. I literally sat there where those files were on the floor and cried. And I just said, you know, what did I do? I took everything I've done for since I was 17 years of age, and I just tossed it. And then I got up and went to my desk and said, now I'll tell you what you do. You think, and you create, and you imagine, and you learn, and you grow, and you ask questions, and you do all the things you got to do, Todd, to stay on the edge. The result of it is I am living literally in the most creative time of my life. Yeah, I'm a fan of John Wesley, as you know. John Wesley burned his sermons every 3 years. Every 3 years, he burned them. I am not impressed with success. I'm not. I'm impressed with growth. And if you're growing, I'm happy. And if I'm not growing, I'm not happy.
That's great. Not impressed with success, impressed with growth.
Yeah.
Last question. Recently at a staff meeting here at Christ Fellowship, you shared that leaders not only need to see more than other people and not just see before other people, but they need to see more and more before. Yeah. Can you unpack what that means and what that implies for us as leaders?
Well, when I started off as a leader, you didn't need to see before. You just need to see more. But because of technology now, you need to see before. And so the question is, if that's the one thing all leaders have in common, by the way, seeing more than others see and seeing before others see. So if that's the case, then now what I need to do in growth, again, Todd, is I need to see more, and I need to see more before. In fact, in developing the Leader 2.0 book, my chapter on vision is all about that. To see more and more before, you've got to expose yourself to people, you've got to expose yourself to places, you've got to be committed to having personal growth. I even talk about the God factor and the fact that you have to have a God room in your life to let Him do an expansion in your life, and you know, God room, you know, is the separation between my best and what God can do, and my best is whatever my best is the floor. For God room. That's where it begins. You know, it's all above that.
Yeah, so you can do above and beyond anything we can do.
Yeah, exceeding abundantly, isn't that true? So that's what it's about.
That's great. Well, John, thank you for taking a few minutes sitting down with everybody today. Would you help me thank Dr. John Maxwell?
Thank you.
Thank you. Bless you. And if you don't have the book, Developing the Leader Within You 2.0, we want to give it to you today. So we have a copy for everybody when you leave today. Take this with you. Read this. 80-some% of the book has been changed and improved, new and improved, so we can be a new and improved leader. Would you help me welcome my 7th grade girlfriend, Julie Mullins, to the platform today, baby? All right. We met in church. Hey.
Yeah, hey.
Puppy love is real to a puppy. That's all I can say. And we dated on and off all through high school and into college. I always thought we dated more on than off.
It's definitely more off
She
than
always
on,
says more
definitely.
off than on,
Yes.
but which I don't know what that says about me. Maybe I was clueless, but I won. That's all I can
You
say.
did.
So
You totally did.
Yeah. Hey. You know, a couple of questions, babe. We're asked a lot. Have we always led together? Have we always been doing this together?
Yeah, the short answer would be yes. But in 30 years, I would say that's looked about 30 different ways, right? You know, when God calls us as individuals, he places, you know, gifts and abilities. He creates us with kingdom potential. And so it's the same thing when he calls two people together that are full of kingdom potential. He calls them to be a power union, right? And he calls them to, so anybody leading in ministry together, when he calls you together, there's a kingdom story that he wants to write. And so when I think about the call that's been on our lives, you know, for the last several years, and all of you that are in this room have been called, that are called to help people to experience the John 10:10 life, that call hasn't changed in the last 30 years, but our assignment and my assignment has changed in every single season. You know, I look back and I think about, you know, the early season when we first got married and our church wasn't very big and you were the youth pastor and the music guy and the janitor, making $100 a week. You know, I taught school in that season. I called that our sugar mama season, right? Because I was the sugar mama in the family in that season. And then there was a season where I was in worship ministry, and then a season when, you know, when Jefferson, our son, you know, had some significant issues that we needed to address at home. And so in that season, I was home a lot and really focused on him. But, you know, every single season builds on each other. And in this season, in most of those seasons, I served without a title. You know, in this season, I'm officially on staff and I serve on the team here. But most of my ministry seasons have been untitled seasons. But our leadership isn't about a title, it's about influence.
That's right. That's what leadership is. Leadership isn't a title. Right. And just maybe before we jump into the next question, when it comes to that issue of women leading in church and women leading, that can be a confusing topic for some people. It can be even a divisive topic for some churches. And I just want to say this, as we jumped in, we've always been leading together, but when we stepped up to co-lead the church together, we spent a lot of time under authority of our elders, praying with them, praying through what that means, what that looks like, what does the Bible say. And so let me just touch on this, and then if you want more information, it's in the Dropbox, all the study that we've done on this topic. People that are on both sides of this issue, there's great people on both sides of this topic, great churches on both sides of this topic. This is not an issue of biblical authority. It is an issue of biblical interpretation. Because both people believe in the authority, but whether you fall on this side or that side of whether women should lead or not lead or be a pastor or not be a pastor, both groups would say we believe in the Bible as the ultimate authority for our lives and for the church. It's really how we go to interpret the scripture. And we understand that when we're building a theology on anything, we don't build that on one or two verses. We build that on the full preponderance of Scripture. What does the Bible say from cover to cover on this topic? And in light of those verses, I mean, there's two verses that have been interpreted and has maybe limited women leading in certain areas in Corinthians and in 1 Timothy. But you look at those two verses in light of all the other Scripture and everything else that God's teaching, and then you have to do, as a leader of your church or the elders of your church, make the decision of interpreting. But it's not an issue of authority, it's an issue of interpretation, all right? So I just want to, and we can dig in deeper to that through our paper if you have any questions later. But so you just said that most of your time has not been titled. Right. What have you learned in those untitled
there's
times?
been so many lessons learned in the untitled seasons. And, you know, I think the first one is that it's so important that our untitled season not become an entitled season, right? Because a lot of times if we're serving in an area of ministry and we feel like there may be more in us or we're not, or maybe our leaders aren't recognizing, you know, something in us and we want something out there, it's easy for that untitled season to become an entitled season. And what happens is that many times our call is set, but sometimes we want to be promoted and we start promoting ourselves. And when we promote ourselves, we can miss out on the promotion that God has us. And many times we promote ourselves out of the the assignment that we're in, we miss the lessons that God was trying to teach us in that assignment. And we find out that wherever we go, there we are. And so we have to learn that lesson again. And so many times that untitled season that can become the entitled season, we can start promoting ourselves. Or sometimes another thing that happens in our entitled season is when we feel like that we may be sitting on the bench. Right? We feel like I've got more in me, and we're sitting on the bench and we're watching everybody else live the ministry dream. And so we could be sitting, when we're sitting on the bench, we're watching the game being played. Our assignment in our untitled season isn't to sit on the bench. Right. It's actually to get in the batting cage and start warming up. Right. Because every single season builds on each other. And I know that those seasons of hiddenness were the seasons that prepared me for the assignments that he had for me in the next season.
Yeah, and that's good. Good word. And sometimes your promotion doesn't always feel like a promotion. When I was the executive pastor, we had a need in the church, and you were involved in worship ministry at the time, and I came to you and said, hey, babe, I need you to help me.
My first official position on staff was actually in ministry boot camp, also known as children's ministry. Is anybody out there, any children's people? Yeah, you guys are my favorites, right? And during that season, I was in worship and creative ministries, and those were my people. I loved it. But during that season, Todd said it would be about 3 months, 22 months later, I stepped out of children's ministry. And what I realized in that season was, that what I'm a part of is bigger than the part I play. And many times in ministry, no matter what we're called to do, but no matter what our title is, there's times that we have to jump in and to be able to be a part of the bigger picture.
Yeah, so good. Last question. In this area of couples leading together, because there might be some other couples here, what do you believe is one of the most important issues to address?
I think a couple things. One thing is that I think that clarity, right? I think that it's become second nature for the two of us to serve together and to lead together because we've been doing it for 30 years now. But it's not always second nature for everyone else around us. And so bringing clarity to my role, just as, my role is like any other role at the church, and there's a job description, and we try to bring clarity to the team around us so that they know exactly what my position is. And I think this is important in any role. We have got girls serving in all different ministries at the church, serving alongside their husbands, and many in spiritual leadership, but maybe not organizational leadership. So the best thing that we can do for our teams is to provide clarity so that they know what to expect and that we can lead strong together.
That's great. Would you help me thank my wife, my bride? Love you, babe. And put your hands together for my dad, Coach Mullins. Come on, Coach. When I tell you that he is truly he is my hero. He is a man of integrity. He is the greatest leader I know. I am not exaggerating one bit. I have seen his life completely on platform and off platform, and it's completely the same. There's no difference. I've never heard this man utter one word negative about another ministry or another pastor or another church ever. I mean, that's how. So, Dad, I love you. I thank you. Thank you for being my pastor. Thank you for being my coach since I was very little. Made me play all sports, whether I liked it or not. So, what I love about Dad is he knows who he is. He knows what God has called him to do. And Dad, you have not let anything distract you from that calling. I want you to talk just a minute about how have you maintained such clarity and focus through all the years to keep the main thing the main thing?
Well, first of all, I want to tell you, Todd, how proud Mom and I are of you and Julie. And just so thankful that we get to continue to be a part of the great things God's doing here at Christ Fellowship. When I think back over the years of ministry, and we've been here, 34 years here at Christ Fellowship, but when Donna and I were married over 52 years ago, we always understood the value of the local church, and we always wanted to serve the local church. So we've been serving the local church on a volunteer basis our entire life, and only 34 years ago did we step into full-time service of the church. But when I look back over it, I think it's a sense of the sacredness of the call of God on our lives, and treating that sacred call with such reverence and respect for that call. because we don't want to take that for granted. And Don and I had a great example in your great-grandfather and grandmother, my grandfather and grandmother, who was my pastor. And I watched his life of integrity and his passion for God, and his passion for people. And that got on me. And when we recognized the call, when Mom and I stepped out to accept that call, we knew we were accepting a great responsibility of what's been entrusted to us in the call. So we've always treated that with such reverence and guarding that personal integrity in that. And I think that has kept us both energized and excited about the things of God. And then what John has said, being a football coach, you're always wanting to learn and grow and improve, and you're always evaluating game films. You're always trying to get better. Yeah. I mean, that get better thing is just ingrained in us. So I think that's kept us fresh and excited through the years as we've been open to growth and always trying to improve and get better at every stage of our life and ministry. So that's been part of the secrets.
You mentioned integrity and character a couple times in that answer. Could you just maybe double click on that a minute about the importance of integrity and character in leadership within the church, not just even leadership, but specifically, man, with what we do?
Yeah, I think it goes back to the awareness of being faithful in the small things and treating the small things as sacred things in your life. And really, I think one of the keys to maintaining integrity over a long period of time in your life and in your ministry, it starts in your relationship at home. It starts in a relationship that Don and I, my precious wife of 52 years, have had together, and being able to pray together and worship together and serve together, and that always brought balance and alignment back into our life. And then recognizing that we have to lead by example. And I want to bring honor to the generations before us. We're blessed with a great legacy of generations before us, and honoring that generational blessing, and at the same time setting the right tone for you, the right tone for our daughter Noelle, and the right tone for Julie, and now for our grandson. I've always felt that a great sense of that responsibility and honoring of the Lord. And I have in my office, as you know, Todd, I have a corner I call my corner of inspiration and accountability. And I have a picture of my great-grandfather, who was a circuit riding preacher in the 1890s. And I have a picture of my grandfather preaching from the pulpit where I preached my first sermon when I was 16. I have that pulpit, by the way, in my office. If you want a special anointing on you, come by my office and just touch the pulpit, baby. You know, I'm an old coach, and now the coach of things, locker room, you rub and touch and everything. You know, when I come out to preach, like I preached this last week in the Super Bowl, I walk out by the pulpit. I got the pulpit in my grandfather's church in my office, and he built that pulpit and preached behind it faithfully all those years. So I grab it. I say, Lord, give me a fresh anointing today as I go out to share the word. And I have a picture of Billy Graham, who's always been a hero of mine and a mentor, and Dr. Bill Bright, founder of Campus Crusade for Christ. I have those men in the corner. And by the way, I found a cute little quote from Billy Graham. I want to show this one to you. Look at this quote. Can you put that up? Look at this. A real Christian is a person who can give his pet parrot to the town gossip. And you know, think about that one for a minute, you know. And you realize that what you say at home, what you say in the privacy, what you say in those private moments, those are critical moments, you know. And I realized early on, Don and I made the decision. We want to raise our kids in such a transparent, authentic environment, and we're far from perfect, but it does matter. And so we guard the small thing. Grandpa said to me, your great-grandfather, son, if you be faithful in the small things, you will be prepared for the great things God has waiting for you. So good, Dad. Be faithful in the small things. And then every day is a decision. And I found this quote by Dr. Bill Bright. I wanted to share that with the team. He said, every day I find countless opportunities to decide whether I will obey God and demonstrate my love for him or try to please myself or the world system. God is waiting for my choices. And so it's like an awareness of wanting to honor him. One of my favorite verses in the Bible is found in 1 Samuel chapter 2, verse 30. And you remember the story, an unnamed prophet comes to the priest Eli, and he's warning Eli and warning his sons. But he says this, God says, those who honor me, I will honor. Yeah. Now he goes on to say, those who dishonor me, I will disdain. I don't like to quote that part. But I like the fact that when we strive to live a life that brings honor to him, we are in a position to receive that honor and blessing upon us in generations to come.
And Dad, you and Mom have done that so well. And Julie and I honor you both. In fact, what we're celebrating today by our first conference is really built on the foundation that you guys have been laying so faithfully for decades. So would you help me thank my parents, both of them today? Yeah, thank you. And you can stay on your feet and welcome Lance Witt to the platform. Lance Witt. You can grab a seat. How you doing, my brother? I love you. Lance is one of my favorite people on the whole planet, and I mean that. Lance was a senior pastor. He became an executive pastor for Rick Warren back in the days when the Purpose-Driven Life was in full swing. And coming out of that, and years later, you begin to see a lot of pastors just kind of their life goes spiral, and they were ruining relationships, and just so you felt called to minister to pastors, and you started a ministry called Replenish. And he came to me one day and he says, Todd, I got this vision for a ministry that are going to help pastors stay holy, healthy, and humble. And I said, I want to be holy, healthy, and humble. Would you help me? And so we've been bringing Lance in. Every month, he flies in for 3 or 4 days to work with me and Julie and our senior leadership team, because we want to have that at the heart of who we are. And you've got a book out called Replenish. You got a new book coming out, but you really focus on soul care. So let's just stay there for a minute. When we hear the term soul care, a lot of times it's got some baggage with it, because we all maybe have different ideas of what that means, sitting around singing Kumbaya or something, and we don't want to do that. So from your perspective, what does it mean for a leader to care for their soul, and why is it so important?
Yeah, I think my understanding, obviously, just like all of us, is rooted in my story. So I got saved in a Southern Baptist church and at the age of 12, and I would describe my church's attempt to disciple me as behavior modification. Like start doing certain things and stop doing certain things. And that's part of my discipleship. But what I didn't realize is that there was a beneath the waterline part of my life, my soul, that I really wasn't paying attention to. And so I grew up really kind of neglecting that. I knew I had a soul. I knew Jesus saved my soul. I just didn't know I was supposed to pay attention to it. And so really part of my story is those years I was at Saddleback, the truth is I got in a pretty unhealthy place. And the pace of my life was out of control. I was living like I didn't have any limits at all. And it was just not, it was a season of neglecting my soul. And as a type A, driven, kind of workaholic personality, when I got a job at Saddleback, it was like being an alcoholic and getting a job at a bar. And it was a tough place for me. And so I feel like, honestly, Todd, the last 11 or 12 years, it's been about trying to learn how to live from a healthy soul. And so when I think of my soul, I think of that part of me that's not flesh. So I think it's the combination of all my will, mind, emotions, heart. It's all of that. And I think it's so important because it really is consistent with what Jesus talked about when he said the Christian life is inside to outside. That always goes from the root to the fruit. It always goes from the invisible to the visible. And so like Dallas Willard says, your soul is like a stream of water which informs and directs and governs every other part of your life. So it's like the operating system of your life. And I think it's a couple of reasons why I think it's so important is that, number one, it is consistent with kind of how Jesus talked to us about the Christian life. And it is from inside to outside. So I think it's consistent with that. But also, here's the bigger issue, at least for me. I think when I don't pay attention to my soul, I run the risk of actually derailing my life. A guy by the name of Parker Palmer has a favorite quote of mine. He says, a leader has a special responsibility to pay attention to what's happening inside himself or herself, lest the act of leadership do more harm than good. That if I don't pay attention to what's going on inside of me, I will start to depart my inner life from my outer life. I get into image management, and I run the risk of actually prostituting the sacred gift of leadership. So I think soul care does matter in the life of a leader.
Yeah, it does. So let's get practical for a minute.
Okay.
You got a lot of busy pastors and ministry leaders here. How does this intersect with just schedules and priorities and demands that get on our life? What should we be thinking? How should we be doing this?
If there was one lesson I would say I've learned or learning over these last decade, it is that I have to learn how to slow down and create space in my life. And I think the good news is God has given us a very practical strategy in this command called observing Sabbath. That has been a huge game changer in my life. And I really think it's about learning this rhythm of life, Todd, that is about learn to work hard and then unplug hard. And both of those are really parts of the equation. You know, they define a football game as 22 people in desperate need of rest and 70,000 people in need of exercise. And I think you got to decide which side of that equation you're on. And some of us are in desperate need of rest. And so you've got to learn how to practice Sabbath. And it's not just, though, about your rest. I've become convinced it's also about your spiritual formation. You can't be who God wants you to be unless you learn how to be quiet and hear the voice of God in those moments of Sabbath. And so I would give you two practical challenges. One is study this for yourself theologically. Because if you don't come to a biblical conviction of this, the gravitational pull of busyness in ministry will always win the day. And secondly, I would challenge you, get it on your calendar. One of the biggest things that helped me is putting it into the structure of my week. And by the way, on my calendar, it says Sabbath. That communicates something different than day off, right? And so if you went to my calendar right now for the next year out, because I travel, I don't get to do Sabbath the same day every week, but it's on my calendar for the next year.
That's great. So that's one thing we can do. We can go change our calendars right now.
Yes, absolutely.
Jesus in the theology study. That's good. Last question. You've got a new book coming out, High Impact Teams. It's called Where Healthy Meets High Performance. Because we're not just talking about healthy, Sabbath, sit back, don't do anything. We are high performance, go get it done kind of people. So it's give us a nugget out of the health side and a nugget out of the high performance side out of this new book.
Okay. The book really is about trying to bring together the synergy of both great relationships and great results. And so on the great relationship side, I would say one is learn to pay attention to the emotional health of everybody on the team. A lot of teams blow up, not because of competence issue, not because people don't love Jesus. They blow up because of internal baggage that leaks out on the team. And so I would just say, if you're a leader in the room today, make it part of your mission to help your people become better Christians, not just better leaders.
That's good. That's great.
And then on the performance side, if I could just say sort of one thing, it would be, well, it's going to be a two-part one thing. It would be get tenaciously clear about priorities. And remember that activity does not equal productivity. And there's a difference between a to-do list and a must-do list. Yeah. And so for every individual on the team and the organization, you got to get clear about what's most important. And then I would say that we don't do this well. We have to get courageous about evaluating performance regularly. Once we are clear about priorities, it is okay for us to expect people to work hard and get the results and to have conversations around this. So my challenge to you would be, don't let our terminal niceness in the church result in a non-performance culture in the body.
Come on, somebody. That right there, the 7 minutes was for somebody. That's why you came to conference. Would you help me thank Lance Witt? Hey, you've got a breakout session tomorrow, right?
Yes.
So if you want more of this, he's got a breakout session tomorrow. All right, help me welcome Rich Wilkerson Jr. to the platform. Come on, Pastor Rich.
I'm doing great, man.
I like those red shorts, pants.
Thank you. Yeah, pants. Yeah, thank you. God bless.
Yeah.
Good to be here.
It is so good. What are you doing? I
want to document some of this.
Okay. Hey.
How are you?
Are we on
Instagram
say hi to
right
now?
Out there?
Hey guys.
Hey, we're here
at church
conference. Make some noise.
Yeah.
I feel like everybody should be here. We're coming back next year. It's going to be incredible. 2019. Do we have a theme yet?
Do we have a theme yet, Julie? Julie tells me these things if we have a theme. I don't know if we have a theme for our conference next. There is a theme. I don't know what it is, but it is a theme. We'll tell you before
Well,
tomorrow.
we just promoted
Great.
the whole thing, so
good.
it's
We're
good.
good.
To go.
Hey,
here we go.
You are a new daddy.
Yes, sir.
Just
2 weeks.
2 weeks
and
ago.
1 day.
I think I got a picture
Do we have a
of
photo?
your family. Oh, there's a
Holy
little guy. There's
smokes, look at
Wyatt.
that kid. Wyatt Wesley Wilkerson, ladies and gentlemen. His initials are WWW. World Wide Web right there. Look at that kid, man.
That's a miracle in motion right there.
It really is,
For those
man.
that don't know the whole story.
8-year journey
Yep.
for us that
Yep.
we struggled with infertility for 8 years, and we just had a miracle boy. So we've been married for 11 years, and this has been the coolest 2 weeks of my entire life.
Yeah, so thank you for being with
No,
us
are you kidding me?
right here during this. Let me
Yes.
jump into this. You are building a great church in Miami, VU Church. We're going to be with you Sunday night. But God has stretched your influence so far beyond just Miami. You've got a global influence. I can be watching your Instagram feed and you're at church, praying with people on Sunday, and then Monday you're backstage at a Bieber concert going, halfway around the world or whatever. I don't know. My question for you is what advice can you give us on how we can reach culture instead of bashing culture? Sometimes we think we got to bash it or call it out. How can we reach it?
That's a great question. Number one, I want to say what an honor it is to be here. We love Christ Fellowship so much, and so thankful you guys are putting this conference on, and our church down in Miami has learned so much because of you guys, and you and Julie both have really been huge resource and huge voices in our life, so thank you for letting us be here. I think it's a huge question. I really think, though, it begins with it. Sometimes it's really, really hard to create change in areas that you don't participate in. And so I think one of my favorite thoughts is that many times, the devil invades whatever we avoid. So if we avoid it, the devil invades it. If we avoid it, darkness is going to invade it. And that's what's happened so much in America, is that the church has decided to fall back, and the church has decided to retreat, and the church has decided to create holy huddles of people that are just like us. And because of it, so many times we're not invited into the conversation. And so I think when we started VU Church, what we were trying to say is that we want to be a part of the conversation. You might not like everything we have to say, but I think that we do have something to say. And I think that we've got to continue to try to build communities in churches like this one where you can belong before you believe, and you can belong before you behave. And I think when we do that, we lend ourselves to being in a position that we have a voice into culture. But we've never had a strategy to change culture. We've always had a strategy to serve culture. And I think that if we'll serve the city, if we'll serve the culture, God will give us the ways to see it changed.
That's so good. When you say what we avoid, the enemy can invade. So we need to step into those places that God grants us. How do you stay relevant? So your church is young. You got a lot of young people in it, but you also got older people in the church, and you're relevant to both age groups. I mean, what's your perspective on reaching both of groups without making one of them feel excluded?
I think that leadership is always about just authenticity. I think one of my favorite verses that I've really grown to love over the past few years, especially getting to start VU Church, the Apostle Paul, he said, we didn't just preach the gospel, we shared our lives. I think there's something so important about just sharing your life with the people that you're doing it with. I think many times if we're not careful, we can turn church into a program. And all we're thinking about is, Sunday, it's all about the weekend. And I know the heart of what that's about, but that's not really what church is. Church is not a Sunday program. Church is a group of people. Yeah. And I think that when we lead from a place of authenticity, a place of vulnerability, I think people are looking for that, and people are hungry for that. And so it doesn't matter if you're 20 years older than the person leading it or 10 years younger. I think people gravitate towards folks that are saying, hey, I don't have it all put together. I was joking yesterday with some of the leaders that we were getting to chat with, and it's encouraging and discouraging that always the sermons that people like the most that I preach are like the ones where I'm talking about all my failures and all of my mistakes. And many of the leaders out there, they would have that exact same experience. And the reason why is because people don't relate to your success or to your strengths. They relate to your pain, they relate to your hurt, they relate to your doubts, to your vulnerability. And if we can create safe places in churches where people can be honest and transparent and vulnerable, where people are allowed to mess up and that they will be walked with through that, I think that you will start to see churches that are full of not just one generation, but multi-generational. And I really believe that we serve the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Yeah. And so we don't have a goal to be a millennial church. We have a goal to reach the people in our city and every age and every demographic and every person. We want to see them all come to Jesus. The Great Commission, I think, is for everybody. So that's what we're trying to see accomplished.
That's great. That's great. Hey, this younger generation is really all about tolerance and just accepting people as they are and accepting everything as it is. How do you call them up to truth when it flies in the face of culture and everything else that culture's saying? You did that last night here to our young people, but how do you, as an approach to teaching truth to this generation, how do you do that?
Yeah, I think the Bible is what we stand on. It's God's authority, and it's sharper than any double-edged sword. And it does so much of the heavy lifting for us. And we as preachers, we're just proclaimers of the gospel. Our job is to get up and however your style is, holler that, teach it, whisper it, whatever works for you, or to proclaim that and put, I think every Sunday I've got 52 Sundays, and I'm trying to figure out different ways to bring the gospel to people and bring the message. What is the message? Jesus Christ came, took everything that you deserve so that we could get everything that he deserves. It's really, really good news. It's really exciting news. I think that the culture we live in today, that's one full of tolerance, I think that many times what we have to learn how to do, and I think this goes on both sides of the coin, whether you're a believer or a non-believer, is that many times we live in this world today that if you disagree with somebody, we think it gives us a right to disrespect them. And a lot of times we also think, hey, if I don't agree with you, I can't accept you. And I think both are just wrong. I think we have to get back to learning how to have real conversations with people. I think real life change happens in conversations. And so I think in our church, we preach big, and then our church is built on small groups. It's built on what we call VU Crews, where conversations are taking place. And we've gone through every type of social topic you can think about that's polarizing in the world, and it's really polarizing on CNN. It's not as polarizing when you actually get over a dinner table and you have a conversation. I'm one of these kind of people, and maybe I'm idealistic, but I actually believe that a lot of the problems we have in our nation, a lot of the problems we have in our world, if we could just get people to sit down and have a dinner together, we could solve a lot of stuff. And so I think a lot of that stuff gets solved in this next generation by building relationship and having conversations.
Great. Would you help me thank Pastor Rich Wilkerson?
God bless you.